Hello, hello. Thump. All right. Okay. Come on in. As soon as Susie sits, it'll be official, that's right. Okay. Now we can start. Why don't we start with prayer? Okay, and I've asked Jackson Overturf to lead us in a prayer. What happens when you walk in?
When you're walking right on time, right? Cool. Let's pray. Dear Father, thank you so much for an incredible day. God, thank you for the beautiful weather outside this evening. And God, thank you so much for this time to gather here together as a family and just to see each other's faces, get to fellowship, and God, get to learn together. I pray that we are all just attentive, and God, that we can really walk out of here tonight with some new knowledge, and God, that will help us draw closer to you. Father, we thank you so much for this time. Pray that you'll bless us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Actually, very excited for tonight. We've been wanting to do this for a very, very long time, and it just happens to be when a lot of people are sick, which is kind of a bummer. But that's also why it's online, and we're recording it to make sure that we are able to get it out to everybody. But what we're doing tonight is we're actually talking a little bit about finances and what it is, and we've invited some guests to come on in. These are two guys that keep me broke right here. They are our agents that we work with at Charles Schwab. And we've asked them to come in to explain a little bit about what they do and what it is and how to save for the future. And a lot of people don't know, but John Norman worked on the exchange for a number of years, correct?
Yeah, I worked with the exchange, yeah.
And so he's got a lot of personal knowledge and experience that he is going to set these guys up to share about. So, and then we also have people within the congregation that are very good with this stuff. But it's important for all of us to understand that God gives us something incredible that we need to be good stewards of. And a lot of people just are not good stewards when it comes to their finances. So we are going to learn a little bit about that tonight. So I am going to turn it over to John. Here's your...
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I need a prop.
Yes.
So my name is John Norman. Some of you probably know me. Some of you may not recognize me because I discovered this past weekend that if I'm wearing different glasses, I was walking into an event and I waved and somebody was like, "Who is that?" I said, "I don't know, but obviously they know us because they're waving." And then I took my glasses off. They were sunglasses. And they were like, "Oh, it's John." So normally I wear these blue glasses, which are more, oh, there we go, see? But these are my whimsical glasses, my creative glasses. These are my glasses where I'm like, I gotta be studious and like I know what I'm talking about.
Money looks
So-
better through those, right?
Yes, everything, yes. These are rose-colored. So just a bit of a background. So why am I up here? So as you heard, I do have a background working with a lot of investment professionals and different individuals. But I think also, as would have it, I'm up here because I'm kind of the poster of not what to do when you're starting out, and also encouragement and hope that it does get better, because I was on full ride for college, but I still left in debt. Hadn't really worked out what a budget was. had a very friendly bank manager who kept okaying my overdraft. But when I got into the workplace, my company was like, oh, we have this employee matching for retirement. I'm like, cool. And then I left that job after 3 years, and I'm like, I'm going to spend that money. And I did, so that was not the best thing. These guys will tell you that's not the best thing to do. But it's funny that God ended up getting a job working with the New York Stock Exchange, working with trading, working with a lot of things that you probably hear about on the news from time to time and go, what is all that about? But God has shaped my thinking over time, and I wanted to share some of that now. So we're actually a slide behind, but don't worry, that's the slide we're behind. One of these is not like the others. So that's me outside Charles Schwab. I was allowed in, but Jacob and Jeremy are both here. They work at Charles Schwab in the Friendly Center. And I think it's just great that they're actually here, because I wish I knew, I wish I had this opportunity in the beginning. But I'm not a financial advisor. I would get the t-shirt, but that's not a wise investment for me. Okay, so now wherever you're coming from, maybe you're, you know what, I went online, I did some financial planning, and it looks like I can retire at 62 and live comfortably for 11 minutes. Yes. Right? Or maybe you're the, what I can tell you is I was meant to be rich because I love to spend money. Or what's my plan for the future? To be honest, I didn't really think I would get this far. But we are here to help you out tonight. And just so that you know, the way we're going to be set up tonight is I'm going to talk for a few minutes. We're going to look at one of Jesus' parables. I would call it the retirement parable, but I'm probably going to never be allowed to speak again. But it's a good parable for us to talk about. And then we're going to have the gentlemen, Jacob and Jeremy, are going to give us 7 investing principles. And then we're going to do some Q&A. And I've got questions in case, you know, we're kind of stumbling for some questions. They're hoping that you're going to have questions because they're worried that I've teed them up with really difficult ones. So let's turn to Luke chapter 12. And we're going to look at where Jesus is talking to the crowd. And so just a bit of a background. A man comes up to him and says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. I don't have anything. I want some inheritance." And so Jesus says, "Who made me the one to make this decision? Why am I the one making this decision?" And we're going to pick up in verse 16, because I did tell people I would be 10 minutes. So in verse 16, everybody there, hopefully? So then he, Jesus, told them a parable. A rich man's land was very productive. He thought to himself, "What should I do, since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? I will do this," he said. "I will tear down my barns and build bigger barns, and store all my grain and my goods there. Then I'll say to myself, 'You have many goods stored up for many years. Take it easy. Eat, drink, and enjoy yourself.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' That's how it is with anyone who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." So you might say, why did I pick this passage? Or why was this passage? I really believe this passage was placed on my heart to share. It's a passage that's moved me. There's a lot of sad statements in this. You know, we learn that the man was already rich. Jesus starts out by saying he was a rich man, but he didn't feel like he was rich enough, right? It says that the earth gave up the crops, right? But the man fails to see that, right? He fails to acknowledge God's part in getting him to where he was. And I think that's the one thing I would say, as we're looking to save for retirement, keep God in the middle of the picture. Realize that, and if you've watched the stock market or if you've been in the stock market at all, you can feel like there is no rhyme or reason to what goes on. It is in the hand of God. And it can definitely feel like that at times. And he stores up the crops. He doesn't use them. And the man thought to himself, what should I do? And I think that's a breakdown right there, because the man is portrayed as somebody who doesn't have any friends or any connections. So he's got these crops. He's got a lot of crops. He's like, I'm going to put it in barns and store it up. Now, I might be thinking I should have a banquet and invite my friends over, or, different things you could do with the crops. But he just wants to keep it all to himself. And he doesn't have friends or family that he's comfortable or interested in asking. And it shows kind of the broken relationships, a broken relationship that he has in understanding where God is in the picture, and a broken relationship with friends and family. He realizes he has surplus grain, but he continues to store it up. It's funny that he says, I have nowhere to put it. But then he says, I'm going to tear down my barns. So he does actually have barns, and maybe what he needed to do was stop hoarding and take some of the other stuff out. Anyway, and when he's done, he congratulates himself, and he says, I can now take it easy. I'm all set. And so God, again, is not in the picture. And I think this is something to really sort and wrestle with, because it can be easy to get caught up in savings and investments and retirement and what you're going to do at the end and those things. And really, God falls out of the picture so easily. Now then, not in the Bible. This is Alice in Wonderland with the Cheshire Cat. And Alice is walking along. If you know the story, I was not an English major. So anyway, Alice is walking along. She sees two paths. And she looks and she sees the Cheshire Cat. It's already crazy. And she says, which path should I take? And the Cheshire Cat says, where do you want to go? Where do you want to end up? And she says, I don't know. And he says, any path will do then. Any path will do. So I want to encourage you to think about, have a vision for what you're going to do in retirement. What you're going to do. So there's going to be talk about reaching your magic number, and there's all ways of working out what the magic number is. But the number is just a number. Have a vision for what you want to do and what you believe God wants you to do. A couple of examples. I didn't ask them for permission to share this, so we'll just call them John, which could be a double bluff because they could actually be called John. So one of them, I remember when we were young marrieds as opposed to now. And he says, we were talking about finances. And I think that's one of the things is to find somebody who you trust, who can be a confidant, who you can bounce ideas off. Because, going back to the man with the barns, if he had bounced these things off of one of his friends, prayerfully one of them would have gone, you know what, you're kind of missing a bit of the picture here. You're just focused on you and what you're going to get and what you're going to do. You don't see what God could do. So this friend John, he said, in my lifetime, I want to give away $1 million. Now, you might go, wow, yeah, I wish I could have a job. He didn't have a job that could give away $1 million. And his wife worked as a pharmacist in CVS part-time. I didn't check with him on how he's going, but it was a dream of his to be able to give away $1 million in his lifetime. He is still with us, so he's still got time. Another John, now that he's later in his career, he is actually taking less time to work, and he is going and encouraging small churches in Eastern Europe. And so he'll take like 2 months off. He won't get paid. They'll pay for their flights. They'll go over there. Now, he's a government employee, so he doesn't make lots of money, or he didn't make lots of money, but he's choosing how he wants to invest and spend it. Or, maybe your dream would be to go on a church planting, or to fund for interns. And, your vision and plan may change over 50 years. It was one of the things somebody in our small group said. Remind them that there's a long time, and so things can change. But having a vision for what your principles are and what direction you want to go in, like it was one of my dreams to always be able to go and live in different parts of Europe for like 6 months. My health restricts that, but knowing we wanted to do that, we've done other things. Like, for example, we gave, and this is just to show that you don't have to have $1 million to do something, okay? So I called up an administrator in one church and I said, hey, I know there's a small Bible talk group of like 12 people, and I would like to, can you not tell them it came from me? So you guys are not allowed to tell them it came from us. I said, but if we gave you $1,000, would that be enough for a couple to pay for gas and go and visit them and like stay in a hotel for a weekend? And they're like, yeah. I said, do you think anybody would want to do that? And they said, yeah, I think people would be encouraged and inspired by that. And so that meant that this small group had somebody going and visiting them every month. And, it was a small amount. There are many examples of that in the Bible. We like to talk about Acts chapter 2, where they sold, 41 to 45. Verse 45, they sold their possessions and property and distributed the proceeds to all as anyone has a need. In order to do that, you have to have stuff to be able to sell and distribute as everybody has need. Investing without purpose is like driving with your eyes closed. And educating the mind without educating your heart is no education at all. That last one was from Aristotle. Wow. This is my favorite, and has really helped me a lot in terms of when I get sidetracked, because I can be one of those individuals who throws everything into my project, my pet project. And, investing or saving for the future can be like that. So actually, this was also shared last Wednesday. Proverbs 30, verses 8 to 9. Keep falsehood and deceitful words from me. Give me neither poverty nor wealth. Feed me with the food I need. Otherwise, I might have too much and deny you, saying, who is the Lord? Or I might have nothing and steal, profaning the name of my God. And that's a challenge for me, because I'm quite happy to pray to God to make sure that I have enough that I don't steal. But if I don't meet my magic number or my goal, am I confident that God will carry me? And that maybe what he's doing is making sure that I don't deny him and say, I did this all myself. Where is God in this picture? So, it's keep God in the picture. There's so much other passages we could have talked about. There's, as I talked about Acts 2, there's Acts 4, Acts 17. There are lots of verses in the Bible, situations where you see individuals giving to other people in the church. For example, there was Lydia who made clothes, and she made clothes for the disciples, for the church. And, it wouldn't have been, I have an assumption here, that she made them and gave them to them rather than made them pay for them. It doesn't say she didn't make them pay for them, but my assumption is that she didn't, because she was known for her charitable works. All right. Now, I know you want to know, Should I invest in crypto or gold or the stock market? So the one investment I can encourage you with is kindness. Kindness is the only investment that never fails. All right, I'm going to hand it over for the technical details to Jacob and Jeremy, who are going to go through the 7-step presentation. So that's yelling out to the tech team that they can switch the slides now. Ignore the man behind the curtain. So I think, Jacob, you're going to walk us through?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, and thank you for coming.
How are you guys doing tonight? Good. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for inviting me, Jeremy, and myself tonight. We're very excited to be here. Anytime we can work with folks and try and improve your financial situation is something that we strive for. While the slides are getting loaded up here, to give you a little bit of background, a story about myself. I'm originally from the eastern part of the state, in a little town called Farmville. I grew up in a small home with a lot of big hearts. And the reason why I'm passionate about finance is it enables us to accomplish dreams. I want to be able to provide for my family. I want to make sure that my kids are going to be able to accomplish and do things that I've not been able to do in my life. So when I talk to you and I say anyone can start from anywhere and you can accomplish your goals with hard work and dedication, I truly mean it. So we appreciate you inviting us in tonight. What we're going to be talking about is the 7 fundamentals for investing success. Before I kick it off, I'd like to invite Jeremy up here. He's going to introduce himself a little bit, and then we'll get things started.
Thanks, Jacob. Like Jacob said, we're very fortunate and grateful we're able to be here tonight. So my name is Jeremy Zitting. I'm a financial consultant with Charles Schwab. Now, Jacob and I are both here in Greensboro, in the Friendly Center. And basically what we do is we help clients achieve success through investing, saving for retirement, and a lot of the principles we're going to talk about today. I'm originally from Knoxville, Tennessee, was born there, and then moved around as a kid, lived in the Midwest and out west for a while, and then came back this way. And me and my family have got a wife and 3 kids, and we live here in Greensboro. Lived in Charlotte for a while as well, but we just love North Carolina, and we're happy to be here. So I'll let Jacob kind of start the show, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy. All right, so as we're going through the principles here, I want to start a little bit by talking about Schwab and what we like to do here. When we are talking to clients, we want to view the world through your eyes and get it from your perspective and make sure that we're trying to accomplish your goal. And at the end of the day, that goes back to owning your tomorrow, which is our company slogan. We want to empower you to make sure that you're accomplishing the goals for your future overall. So as we go through these slides, we're talking about the 7 principles. But these are 3 big takeaways before we get there that I want you to come away with. The first is you want to work on your plan. And when I say your plan, I mean your plan. What do you want your money to accomplish for you? What are your goals in life? Ignore the outside noise and strive for the goals that you set forth for yourself. The second is to be curious. In this industry, there is a whole lot of jargon, and I mean a lot of it. It can really weigh you down and seem scary at first. But once you break it down, it's really not so difficult to get into the weeds there. So be curious when evaluating these things, and don't act like there's a silly question, because there's not. Everybody starts somewhere from it. And the third thing is to control what you control. If me and Jeremy could stop that stock market from going down this year, you bet our butts we would have done it. But that is out of our control. So we like to stay on track and stay in mind with the things that you can control. So as we go through these topics today, those are going to be 3 points that I hit back on at the end. So today we will start by reflecting on your goals. So I'll talk a little about what does that plan look like for you, what are things you should consider, and how do you define your plan. We'll implement your plan when it comes to these 7 principles. So kind of reflecting as we go, how do these principles affect what I'm trying to do at the end of the day? And then we're going to talk to you about what does monitoring this look like? How often should you check on things? How often do you reevaluate your plan overall? Right. So the first thing we need to do is establish your goals. So I mentioned earlier I'm from a small town in eastern North Carolina. At the end of the day, my goal is to retire at 55 and live on a farm and be at peace with that. That is what I am striving for. That is what I'm going for. I don't expect any of your goals to be the same as my goals. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that however you're investing or whatever you're saving money for is going to your targeted goals. One of the most important ones is retirement, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. But it could be the first time you're purchasing a home. It could be saving for college education expenses or getting yourself back through school. Whatever it is, you need to make sure that your plan is focusing on that goal, and at the end of the day, however you're investing is matching that. So another part of that is having realistic expectations with your goals. Earlier we talked about having a person that was going to retire at 61 and they had about 11 minutes worth of expenses saved. Yeah. Well, I would say it's probably not a realistic goal. You want to really evaluate what you feel that you can accomplish and what's within your means and be realistic with yourself overall. You can accomplish many goals, but you want to make sure you're not being too boastful for a goal or going for something that's unattainable and then just pushing off other expectations. Another good strategy is to review your goals annually and review how your assets are working towards those goals annually. So once a year, call it your midsummer review, go through and take a look at how you're investing, why you're investing, and see how things are going overall. And we're going to talk about later what things you need to look for while doing that. And if you have a major life circumstance change, let's say a newborn child, or you get married, you need to reevaluate your goals. It's not good enough to just say, oh, I'm going to keep with the old strategy if there's major changes within your life. The reason why planning is so important and why I've spent so much time talking about this to start with is that you can have a chance of having a higher net worth overall. So we did a study and we found that if you are to plan, you're likely to have 2.7 times more of a net worth than folks in a similar profession that did no planning whatsoever. So really visualizing where you want to go and what you want to achieve is important to getting there. You'll have much more success doing it if you're planning ahead. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to Jeremy, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about why it's so important to invest while you're young. He's going to go over a few numerical operations with you and really show at the end of the day, the earlier you start, fundamentally, the stronger your financial situation is going to be. Jeremy?
Thanks, Jacob. So, like it says, start saving and investing today, principle number 2. So topic number 1 there, we got maximize what you can afford to invest. In other words, we're saving as, you want to save as much as you can as soon as you can. And this really kind of makes a lot of sense for, I would say, the majority here. When Sarah and David told us we were going to be talking to a bunch of young professionals. We've got a lot of people that are starting out in life. Now, I see there's some older folks here as well. So it's not the end of the world if you're starting later and you haven't invested, but the amount of time you have in the market, as it says there, is pretty important. So if you're saving early and saving often, and you figure out what your goals are, like Jacob was talking about, set aside a certain amount that you want to allocate towards retirement, and you put together a budget and figure out what your priorities are. That is let's say, probably the biggest driving factor of whether or not you're going to be successful for retirement. I grew up in a family of 6 kids. I was the oldest, and my dad wasn't a high earner. I would say we were lower middle class, but and I would say there were some things that we skimped on. Going out to eat was maybe Little Caesars, and I still like Little Caesars. It's fine to me. I like cardboard for crust. I've been to CC's as well. But I think the CC's is a little more expensive for a family of 8. But so we do Little Caesars. There were some things we skimped on, but we had a good life, and my parents did a great job saving. And even with that low income or kind of lower income, they still put themselves in a great position to retire at a good age, and they're not going to, we've run some projections, and they're going to do fine. And that was even with having 6 kids and helping all 6 with different expenses along the way, getting through college, and all 6 of us have graduated college, and some have gone on to get masters and all sorts of things. So, so saving and then figuring out what you're going to do with those dollars as far as investing are 2 of the big things. And like it says on the slide, time in the market is key. So starting young, and if you guys have ever studied compounding, if you've got a bank account and you earn interest on that bank account, that interest then earns interest. And so you've got a blogger that likes to describe it as you've got these little dollars that are little workers for you, and then those workers are out there working and making more money. So in a sense, investing works that way as well. You've got the compounding of that money over time. So let's see here. The other, one second, sorry. One more thing. Don't try to time the markets. I have a client. I've had a few clients.
Explain what that is. What is timing the market?
Yes, I will. So timing the market would be, the market goes up and down. I'm going to try to figure out when the best time to sell and go to cash is, and the best time to go put all my cash into the market, right? So you're moving in and out of the market, trying to time it, instead of just participating in the market. I've had a client that, this is early 2000s, he decided that things were looking really, really bad there in the housing market. So maybe 2003, 2004, he said, I'm pulling it all out. I'm not going to invest anymore. So he pulled all his money out and he put it in cash. Didn't want to touch any investments. And guess what? He was actually right. The housing market did crash. You guys, some probably remember 2007, 2008, the market crashed. Housing prices went down, stocks went down. And my client said, I was right, but what happened? The market started going back up. And my client, because he was trying to time it, he didn't know when to get back in the market, because it's very tough when the market's going down to pick a bottom, right? So the market started going back up. He said, I think it's going to come back down. I'm gonna stay in cash here, wait it out. The market from 2008 to now and we've had some ups and downs, but for the most part, it's been an upward trend. So he stayed in cash from 2004 until 2022. He's got, he maybe had $500,000 in cash that if he'd invested it would probably be worth $2 million, something like that. So being in the market and participating in the market is more important than trying to time when the market's at a top or when it's at a bottom. So, David, did I explain that well enough on what the timing market is? Okay. So, as you can see here, this is a little example. We have 2 different scenarios. We'll say they're sisters, Maria and Anna. Maria decided to invest 10 years earlier than Anna. Now, over those 10 years, they both put in the same amount of money, except Maria just started 10 years earlier putting money into the market. And you can see that starting 10 years earlier, even though they put the same amount of money into the market, Maria had $134,000 after 20 years, and Anna only had $68,000. So you can see that the time in the market is more important. And then last thing here, talked a little bit about this. Don't try to predict the market highs and lows. So you can see this is a scenario of saying if you were invested in 2020 and you just held your money through the volatility, because 2020 was COVID year, right? If you just held on, didn't try to time the top or the bottom, at the end of the year, you would have actually been higher. Now, if you had missed, top 10 days, top 20, top 30, or top 40 days as far as market return, your principal, the amount of money invested would have been a lot less. So it's more about staying invested, riding the volatility, and depending on, and Jacob will talk about this, but making sure that the amount of volatility, or like the ups and downs of your investments, is something you're comfortable with. So I think that was all I had, so I'll turn it back over to Jacob for principle number 3.
All right. So this is a difficult topic for a lot of folks, because when you're looking at this, you're saying, what is a diversified portfolio really at the end of the day? How do I even build a diversified portfolio? What's a stock or a bond? So what I'm going to do is try and break down this in a simple way. We're going to talk a little bit about risk and how we can allocate towards the goal. The most important factor to remember is that at first, you're not going to know what you're comfortable with when it comes to investing. And over time, you'll get a little bit better at it, and you'll be able to fine tune and tweak things to make sure that it's matching your goal. So knowing your comfort level with risk is important, but it's going to take some time to get used to that as you go through. Another important factor is understanding that different types of investments behave differently. Generally, if you think of something like a stock, it's going to be more volatile than you would have with necessarily a bond. So different asset classes are going to behave differently, and depending on where you are in relation to what your goal is, your asset class should be different. For example, if I'm entering retirement in, let's say, 5 or 10 years, I'm going to want to have a more conservative portfolio than someone that's in their early 20s that has 30 to 40 plus years before they're even considering retirement. So it's important to make sure that your portfolio matches your goals and that you have a diversified portfolio at the end of the day to absorb some of these shocks that you may experience over time. Another key factor is that past performance is not an indicator of future success. Just because something's done well in the past doesn't mean it's always going to do well in the future. So if a stock has performed magnificently for the past year, it could have difficulties in future years. That's where diversification can come in and really help you out overall. So if you look at this chart, and it might be difficult for y'all to see, but there's a couple ones I want to really point out. So the top line you see there is large cap companies. And earlier we were talking about the 2 folks that invested at the same time. And they were investing in what we call the S&P 500. That's a fancy way of saying of the biggest 500 US companies we have. So they just bought something that tracked how they're doing overall. Now, in that asset class, you have less diversification because you're just purchasing the big boy companies in the United States. If you look at what's below that, that's what we call a moderate portfolio. And that is closer to having about 60% in stock and about 40% in bond. And if you take a look at how it's done over that, let's call it 20-year period, they've done fairly consistent with each other, but the large caps have outperformed overall. Below that, you have fixed income. That's another fancy way of saying a bond. And then the bottom line is cash equivalents. So like Jeremy mentioned earlier with his client, they'd stood in cash for about 20 years. If you want a comparison of how cash is done for that 20-year period versus being in the market in some degree, just take a look at the bottom line compared to its peers. Now, when you're figuring out your comfort zone, you're going to see a chart up here. And that's something where Jeremy or I could really help you folks kind of navigate and figure out where you want to be. Generally, you want to be more aggressive the longer you have until a goal comes along, and then you get more conservative when something is coming up. For example, if I'm closing on a house in 3 months, it's going to be a short-term allocation. I want that joker secured. I don't want anything playing around with me closing on my house. But if we have 30 plus years for retirement, we might go with something that's more on the aggressive allocation. So depending on what you feel comfortable with and your time horizon will tell you exactly where you want to be on this scale. Well, why are we talking about this in general? The more diversified your portfolio, the less risk that you're going to carry overall. So it's ideally trying to figure out where you are in the structure, and if you have questions on it, it's something that a professional like Jeremy or I could really help you with. So for minimizing fees and taxes, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeremy. He'll be walking you through that.
Thanks, Jacob. So like we can see here, minimize fees and taxes. So I'd say basically, like Jacob and I have been saying, you can't really control what the market's going to do as much as we'd like to be able to push the market up. We get clients joking all the time about why we aren't holding the market up. It's more about controlling what you can control. I think Jacob mentioned that earlier. So market's going to go up and down, but what we can control is the amount of fees we pay. And Chuck, or Charles Schwab, who kind of goes by nickname Chuck, when he started Charles Schwab in the 70s, he was competing against a lot of brokerage firms that were charging really high fees for placing stock trades. And he came into the market and said, this is ridiculous. You guys shouldn't be charging this much. So he cut fees quite a bit. And so Schwab's always had this mentality of being a champion for the little guy, for the small investor, and being able to always be kind of advancing investing for everybody, and making sure that you are aware of what fees you're paying, and there aren't hidden fees and things like that can be really important. Let's see here. When you're investing, you can invest in stocks, bonds, you can invest in mutual funds, which is kind of buying a lot of different investments within one fund. But what you want to check when you do that is checking the amount of fees you're paying. And sometimes those fees are hard to find. Meeting with someone to kind of analyze that for you and help you figure out what you're paying can really add up over time. And I'm not wearing my glasses. So maximizing taxes, or minimizing taxes. We want to maximize taxes. So fees is one side of the equation. Taxes is another side where, as you invest, the gains that you make can be taxed. At some point, the government is going to take a share of those investments, of the gains you've had. Just like when you're working in your job, they're going to take a portion, right? We can see here, this talks about fees can eat away at your returns. So this goes back to Maria and Anna, but as you can see, the purple is investing with your fees at 1.5%. The darker blue is at 0.75%, and the lightest blue is no fees. So you can see that over time, it cost almost $28,000 for Maria over that 20-year time span just from fees reducing that, right? So you have to, most investments are going to have fees, so it's something you acknowledge, but you also want to make sure that you're not paying too much, right? So because over a long period of time, it can cut into your performance. Trying to minimize taxes, and this one we can kind of also talk about in the Q&A if you guys have questions. Sarah and David mentioned a lot of you guys probably had a lot of questions around investing in your 401k or 403b or thrift savings plan or an IRA. So there are ways to defer taxes. So instead of paying the tax now, you pay the tax later when you take money out. So that way the money can grow tax deferred. So you can see that over a long period of time. You can see the top line is if you were to invest in a tax deferred account like an IRA or a 401k, the amount that you have at the end, even after paying taxes, is still more than if you were just investing in a taxable account. So I'll turn it back over to Jacob about talking about protecting against significant losses. So.
All right. So earlier I mentioned that when you are investing, it involves risk, and that you want to review your allocation to make sure that you're comfortable with the amount of risk that you're going to be taking overall. So what we're going to discuss here is ways to protect yourself and kind of hedge against some of the risk you may see overall. So taking a look at this slide here, what you'll see is that overall, I mentioned the S&P 500 earlier, which is just the big boy stock allocation of all the major companies. So Tesla's, Facebook's, Coca-Cola, the folks that have the most market cap. And they're going to be the blue line here. And the other blend that you have is a stock portfolio that's about 60-40. So the allocation that I mentioned to you earlier. The big difference between the two is you see that they're kind of charting in the same way. But if you zoom into the gray section, you'll see that the S&P 500, when things got more volatile with the market, got banged up a lot more than you would have had with a 60-40 split overall. So one way you can protect your assets is by having a diversified portfolio for those volatile times. For example, the S&P 500 experienced a 45% loss back during the dot-com bubble, when a balanced portfolio only experienced a 21% loss. So if you're just entering retirement around that time, think of the difference of losing 45% of your portfolio versus one-fifth. It's a massive difference for you overall. So as you're planning and you're taking a look at your allocations annually, you want to make sure that you're picking out stocks and rebalancing and having an asset class that it's going to balance your portfolio for the long term. Once again, the closer you get to your investment goal or objective, the less risk you want to take overall. And this is really highlighted here by rebalancing your portfolio regularly. So what do we mean by that? Well, let's imagine you have some of those growth stocks we talked about earlier that have performed extremely well, and you're very excited. You're like, man, my Tesla has took off, or wow, GM is doing great for me lately. And imagine that that company has done well for a longer period of time. Well, what if Tesla suddenly doesn't do as well? Or what if there's a big correction within that individual stock sector? By rebalancing, and what I mean by that is going in and taking some of your gains over time and reallocating it to other investments, it helps protect you during moments of this market volatility. So it's important to be periodically going in and rebalancing your account overall. And to wrap up today, it's very noisy out there sometimes. And what I mean by that is the media can get very loud over what's going on in the markets or anything in general. You really want to stick to your plan at the end of the day. You've got to block out the noise. Like I mentioned earlier, you really want to focus on your plan and your goals overall, and don't worry about what's going out. For example, if I said the Dow Jones lost 1,000 points today, that's a lot scarier than hearing the S&P 500 lost 50, right? At the same time, they're about equal when it comes to what kind of loss you would have expected overall. So ignore the noise, focus on your plan, and make sure that you're following through with your goals. All right, so that about takes us to the end. We're going to open it up for Q&A. I have a little bit of time for that today. Anyone want to kick us off? Yes, ma'am.
I have absolutely no experience in any of this, so it's a little over my head, but I really appreciate what you all said. Thank you. So a lot of people here, like young people, don't have a whole lot of money to just like invest. Is there like a minimum that you would want to start with to invest?
Sure, that's a great question. At the end of the day, any amounts that you can save is going to be helpful. In the real world, things get tight, right? So we have other budgets we've got to take a look at and decide what to do. What we generally say is if you're a single person, you want around 6 months of expenses tucked away, so put in a savings account for a rainy day. And then you can take a look at starting investing for whatever you can budget for and feel comfortable with. If you're a married couple, you can take a look at 3 months of expenses if you're both in the workforce. It really depends on your situation. Everybody knows their situation best, but I would say there's no bad amount to start with. And if you can get a solid emergency fund tucked away and start looking at investing, that's usually an okay thing to do. Yes, sir.
I was gonna say one thing that, so I asked our small group about this kind of thing. And one of the things they said was, some of them, what they had done is when they got their next pay rise or pay increase or whatever, or a change or a second job or whatever it was, that instead of just spending all of that or, you know, getting the next level of, you know, Netflix or Spotify or whatever, what they did was they said, well, let's for the rest of the year, let's live as if we didn't get that, and let's put that into our savings, or let's put that into investing, rather than just, you know, something. So that's one way you could do it, is when there's an opportunity. But I think it is a key point that knowing where you're starting and knowing where you're going to get to. So part of that is understanding what your budget is like. My daughter was, what she said that really helped her was, and she's a social worker, and so she said what really helped her was starting with a budget and thinking about what her long-term goal was. Because then she'd be like, you know what, I'm not going to go out to Panera 3 times this week. I'm only going to do it once, and I'm going to put that Panera money in a jar, and then at the end of the month, I'm going to invest it. And so it helped her to kind of, to have a vision, helped her to make the sacrifices, because she wanted me to point out that it is hard to keep going when it seems like it's so far away.
Absolutely. I'd say that's a great point. Knowing yourself and trying to figure out your situation and what works best for you is going to be very important for that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I am investments and just in general, like building assets and stuff in life is very interesting to me and something that I've come to see the value in. And so I've been studying a lot of it recently. And I think one thing that I'm trying to figure out right now is the balance between investing in things like stocks and bonds and then investing in other things. Something that I've learned is that you definitely want to diversify what you have. And so in your experience, I'm sure that this would change depending on how much somebody makes and kind of where they're at in life. But like, how much would you suggest putting into something like the S&P 500 versus money that you would, I guess, other money that you would use to invest in something else, diversifying?
Sure, that's a great question. So I would start off with saying in general, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing your goals, right? So if we're thinking for retirement for one objective, we're going to allocate for that overall. And if you have something that's more short term, you're going to allocate separately. How you prioritize that is really up to you. In general, it's advised that you try and save close to 15% of your income going towards retirement. And that can include any employer match that you might have. At the end of the day, it's a tough number to get to, but the more you can save, the better of a spot that you're going to be in overall. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
So I have the 401k match, and I feel fortunate to be able to match and get all of that sorted for retirement. I feel fine about that. What would you suggest if I wanted to do a shorter term investment? So if I wanted to take my money out not at retirement, but in like 5, maybe maximum 10 years, for a shorter term goal, where would you suggest that I invest money into, or like what kind of account, I guess?
That's a great question. So you could look at something like a brokerage account, and that allows you to pull money in and out as you see fit. So if you popped up with something next year that you needed to use the investment for, you could take a look at using that. The taxes work a little bit different, and I can get into the conversation a little bit more with you on an individual level. But generally, if you're looking for a shorter term goal, a brokerage account is a good direction to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, sir.
Just like a ballpark, I'm just curious, but how much money, you said people have some money saved away for a rainy day in the savings account.
Sure. So you really want to figure out what your monthly expenses are at the end of the day. So have an idea of what the mortgage, rent, car payments are that you'd have. It's a pretty fixed income. You know what it's going to be. If you're single, you're going to multiply that by 6 to get 6 months and put that in a savings account for yourself. Anything more than that, you can take a look at investing or doing something else with. No, Dave.
What is a good, speaking of the savings account and like the 6-month investment, what is a good short-term vehicle that we could use instead of just, because a savings account makes what? Nothing?
Right. So you could take a look at something like a money market, for example. I'll give you the short version of it. It's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States, and it's like a short-term bond, if you will. So you get a little bit better than you might have in a traditional checking or savings account, just depending on the rate. It also allows you to sell it off quickly. So if you say, hey, I want to sell it, a couple of days, you've got the money available, and you can go make the purchase you're looking for.
And what's the difference between money market account and a CD?
So a CD is basically like a bank loan for you. Think of it as a reverse loan. In order to get the principal of the CD, you have to wait until the CD's up. So if I put it in a 1-year CD, I'm waiting that full year before I can get all the principal for you. You can take out of a CD at any point in time. So if I put $5,000 in, I can pull it back anytime. But the trick is to get the interest that you're looking for, you have to hold it for the duration of the CD.
Do you lose all the interest or do you lose a portion of the interest if you take it out early?
It's typically all, but depends on the CD.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So on that one, the CDs have different time frames though, right? So you can get like a 3-month, a 6-month, a 12-month.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Oh, go for it. Go for it. Oh, gentleman in the back. Oh.
Oh, man. Okay, all right, I'll be quick. So for my advice for the brokerage account, if I know that I can wait until a CD is like accrued time, and not pull out early, would it be better for me to do that instead? The difference between a brokerage account or a CD?
So a CD is like an investment, right? So it's just something that you can purchase inside of a brokerage account. So if you wanted to buy a CD in a brokerage account, you definitely could do that. You could also go buy any stocks you might want or vice versa. So think of the brokerage account as really like the house, and then the investments are the things that you put inside of the house. And that's a CD could be an investment, or a money market can be an investment. There's a lot of investment types.
So are you asking what's the difference between a short-term CD and stocks?
I guess, those are things I've gotten so much advice on and it still goes over my head, so I'm gonna have to probably just meet and talk with somebody.
Oh, that's okay. I think that's a good question. So what a stock is at the end of the day is ownership of a company. Let's say I'm going to start my own company called Jacob Baker Enterprises, and I'm going to issue stock. Well, if you wanted to buy that stock, you would go to a stock exchange and purchase it. And the way we determine the value of that stock is based off what you folks or myself are willing to pay for it. So at the end of the day, all stock is ownership of a company that folks think are worth a certain amount of money. Now, at the end of the day, say Jacob Baker Incorporated does something scandalous, or I do something great. You folks are like, wow, that Jacob Baker company is really interesting. I'm willing to pay this for it. So there can be more volatility with stock overall. It can swing up and down. Now, if we take a look at what we mentioned earlier, like the CD or the bonds, at the end of the day, all you're worried about is my ability to pay you back, right? So if I issue a bond and I'm saying I'm going to give you 3%, well, you don't really care what the public perception is. You care that I'm paying you back. Or what are other bonds paying at this time? So generally, bonds are more stable than you would have with stock overall.
Okay, so it's the amount of risk you're taking, basically.
Yeah, generally, stocks are riskier than bonds. Yep. All right. Yes, sir.
If somebody's like, somebody has like their own business and then they're also like working like for like another company, like what is good to invest into like for your business and stuff? Like what's good to invest into or smart?
So are you talking about for the business itself? So that's a little bit different than what we do. we're really talking more about longer term investments for retirement or such. There's different types of accounts that maybe will help you if you're looking to purchase things out of it, but a little bit different than my expertise would be able to lead you to. Just don't want to lead you the wrong way. Sir. Yes, sir.
So say you want to invest because you want to have a good future with it, but you're in debt. Should you focus on your debt first, or should you invest in like good question? Do both at the same time, or what would you do?
Yeah, so if it's me in that spot, right? What the first thing I'm going to do is try and get my emergency fund built up, right? If I have that emergency fund, something pops up, I can take care of it. I'm not putting it on a credit card or anything like that. So we prioritize the emergency saving fund first. Try and get that 3 to 6 months tucked away for you. Then after that, if your employer is matching you, say with like a 401k, I would put in up to the point you get the company match, because you don't want to leave the free money there. And then anything else you're applying to the debt. So trying to tackle that debt as much as possible. If you don't got the 401k that's matching you, you just plug away at that debt. All right. Yes, sir.
One thing that you guys mentioned very briefly was taxes, and that's something that I know nothing about. And so that's something I'm interested in learning more about is I'm sure that there's money I'm throwing away that I don't know, could get back, or a way to work the tax system that's legal and ethical.
Sure.
And so I don't know, it's just it's something that like I'm very curious as to where can I go to learn more about that. Is that something I can approach Schwab and say, hey, can you sit down and teach me, or is that something that I should go to like something else?
Sure, great question. So I'll start off by saying we're not tax advisors. So if you have any specific tax questions for yourself, always refer to a tax advisor. There's definitely general information that can help you overall. We'd be happy to talk to you about that and talk on your individual level. If you also want to use schwab.com, there's a lot of great resources there about whether you should consider saving in one way for taxes or another. But certainly room for improvement for all of us, even myself included. Not a tax advisor. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to chit chat.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Because even most tax advisors have no clue what they're talking about. The tax system's too complicated. I got a question. When you start off investing, and we don't have tons and tons of money, would you recommend investing just in a straight brokerage, or investing in something like a Roth IRA? I mean, because can't you invest the same thing but in a Roth?
You could. So I would say it depends on your goal. If you're aiming for retirement, a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA are great vehicles for you. But if the goal is to buy a house in 10 years, you want to take a look at something like a brokerage account generally. There's rules you can use for a Roth account and play around with, and so there is with a traditional. But generally, if you want flexibility with when you're pulling your money out, a brokerage account's probably the way to go.
Yeah, Dave, so really your time horizon is the main factor there. How soon do you need the money?
Right.
What's a Roth?
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah. So these are different tax treatments. When I say IRA, all I'm referring to is an individual retirement account. So it is your personal retirement account for you individually. There's a couple of different... There's different type of taxes for you. So for a pre-tax, let's imagine I'm, making pretty good money, but man, they are hammering me with taxes. If only there was a way I could defer these taxes until I'm retired and in a much lower tax bracket. That's for a traditional IRA. You're postponing your taxes till retirement because it's better for you right now. Now, for a Roth IRA, that's where you're saying, well, I want to pay these taxes now. I don't mind because I'm young, in charge, youth in my career. I've got a long time before I need this money. So generally, the more young you are or the lower income you have, the more beneficial the Roth IRA is. The benefits you get from the Roth is you pay the taxes up front, which hurts me too. But what you get on the back end is you don't pay any taxes as long as you leave the account until you're 59 and a half. So you could put in $6,000 a year, That thing grows to, let's just say 400,000, and you could take that joker out when you turn 59 and a half with zero tax. So it's very beneficial for the younger you are to do Roth generally. If you're closer to retirement, there still could be some benefit just depending on your situation, but usually less so, because at the end of the day, you're going to have less income when you're in retirement. Sure. Yes, sir.
So on the Roth versus the regular, the big thing for me, just to give an example, is if you, so there are limits, there's quite a few rules that these guys can go over when you sit down with them. But if you were to put money into a regular IRA account, say you put in $5,000, when it comes to tax time, I'm not an investment professional, so in general, not knowing your whole picture, you can remove that and not pay taxes on it. So it's as if you made 5,000 less for tax purposes, but you pay taxes when you take the money out. So the money grows. Let's say in the Maria example, it grows to 138,000. Every time you take out money from that 138,000, you pay taxes at whatever your tax rate is when you retire. And in theory, your tax rate is lower then because you don't have a big job. Does that make sense?
Right.
Maybe that was too much.
But it's also important for people who are making more money, because if you make a lot of money, your tax bracket goes up, right? But if you put more money into an IRA, your tax bracket actually comes down. Does that make sense?
So we like IRAs.
Well, IRAs are good for some things, but Roth IRAs are also, yeah, it depends on your income level. For most of us, we don't have to worry about that. The Roth IRA is actually a good vehicle for most people your age to grow tax-free for a lot of years. Okay, hold on. I got to say something. Thank you guys so much for coming out, because it sparks a lot of questions that these guys need to start asking and talk more about. Okay, Charles Schwab, I believe, is the largest brokerage firm in the country. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so, but we are not advocating for Charles Schwab. We use them.
Come on.
Yeah.
I've used them for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there are other brokerage firms that you may have heard of. There are Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, Muriel Siebert, what are some other of the big ones?
Morgan Stanley.
Vanguard.
Oh,
Yeah.
Vanguard is its own firm. Now, the thing is if you go to them, you can buy products, at least most products from other, like they can hold Vanguard, they can hold all of those things. What you're looking for in a brokerage firm is kind of one of the things that they said earlier is the fees that they charge. Some charge higher fees for what's called a managed account. So you just give them your money and they do everything for you. You like that one? You know, honestly, a lot of people do, but there are cheap options for managed accounts as well. Like one of their products is called a Schwab Intelligent Portfolio. And it's very low fees, and the computer does everything. They've got algorithms that pick and choose, and so the computer does everything, and it keeps pretty close to on track to what everything else is doing. So that's an option. But you don't have to use Schwab. They're here out of a courtesy to help come teach you. But if you choose to go in and talk to them, that's when you could actually sign up for an account, and you can actually talk more one-on-one to get some of the deeper questions answered. And to you, Rachel, it's never too early to invest. And if you've only got $200, just say, I want to start. And that is the best thing to do. And then the second best, in my opinion, thing to do is to talk to your place of employment, because you can have them set up an automatic withdrawal then you just think about, okay, where's it gonna go from there? That way, it's an automatic, and you don't have to take a check to wherever you go, whenever you do that. Does that make sense? Okay, so, they have some materials.
Yeah, just to wrap up, Jake and I meet with clients every day, and if any of you guys have any questions or want to sit down and review things, there's not a charge to do that. And we'll put out a little pad of paper if you want to put your name, your email, or phone number, and there's a few brochures as well to take with. But Jacob, anything else to add?
Just want to say thanks for inviting us in, folks. It was a pleasure speaking with all of you.
Thank you.